Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series, that show that you watch where we talk about mocks from the LEGO Bionicle community. We just have a chat about what we like, and hopefully from that talk we can inspire you into building something awesome. So today's episode is all about cool color schemes. Now this episode was a very cool suggestion by a good friend of ours, and so today we're going to be talking about some really unique color schemes and going in a little bit about what they mean, what they stand for, and hopefully you can get inspired from some cool color schemes, because heck, that's always something that can help you spawn a mock, is when you come up with a very clever or cool color scheme that you might want to use for that mock. So let's take a look at some mocks that have some really awesome color schemes. The first mock we have today is by Unuku and is called Table Scrap Defender of Copper. So one thing I really like about this is obviously this is a Toa of copper. Obviously Toa have an element that they can control, and so he's taken a bit of creative liberty and looked on the periodic table and picked copper as his element. And something that I think is so cool about that is the color scheme has kind of informed that. You know, you've got this cool Puhato, what is that color called? Is that like dark orange or something? I want to say it is. So you've got that cool, or is rust? It's rust. Haha, I remembered. So you've got that cool rust color that was that came with Pahatu G1 there, and that's the thing. You know, it looks like copper. It even tastes a bit like copper. I mean, I hope it doesn't taste like copper. It's Lego. But besides the point, it works very well for communicating his element of copper. But another thing that's really clever with this is the fact that this mock utilizes a lot of sand green on it too, and that's something that is a case with copper. You know, for example, the Statue of Liberty is made of copper and used to look sort of more like that traditional rust orange, burnt orangey kind of color there. But over time, rust turns in, over time, copper rusts and becomes this sort of sand green color, much like the Statue of Liberty. And so I think that's really clever, is to look into the element and let that inform what the color scheme is going to be. Obviously, too, you can take creative liberties. You don't have to do exactly what the element requires. You could make a yellow tower of fire if you really wanted to, or a yellow tower of ice, whatever. That's totally up to you, but that's at least something to have a bit of a think about if you're a little stuck on what you want to do for your color scheme. Something else I really like about this is, relatively speaking, it's a simple sort of CCBS frame. Like you said, it's just a table scrap. He was just sort of playing around with parts. But it's so cool how a really awesome color scheme like this really makes the mock pop, really makes it look so much cooler. So I think that's really interesting. You know, you can build a simple mock, but if it's got a really effective, beautiful color scheme, it still looks amazing. So I like that a lot. Good job, Unuku. So one thing I often recommend with mocks, with color schemes, is to kind of play around with the sort of tonal colors of a mock. We've seen it in a few past episodes of the Bionicle Inspiration series where, you know, people will use different shades of brown, because, you know, you've got your reddish brown, you've got your old brown, you've got dark brown, things like that. Even sort of black can kind of play into that, so you can kind of play with the various different tonal colors of a color. Now, obviously, this isn't necessarily what Unuku has done here, but I figured just kind of keeping that in mind, you know, it's always interesting to have a think about, well, what do your colors actually specifically communicate? You know, for example, if you're building a Makuta and it's pinks and bright yellows and stuff like that, it may not really work on a Makuta, because typically Makuta are sort of evil and dark, and so as a result you'd use darker colors like black or maybe dark red, or, you know, something like that. So yeah, ask yourself, what do the colors communicate in your mock? Do you have a specific character in mind when you're building this mock? Do you want to communicate a specific mood or tone? And if so, make sure that you pick colors that kind of work in accordance with that. And there's simple color theory with that of, you know, darker colors can resemble sort of evil or whatever. Or if I say red to you, what does red symbolize to you? What emotions does that make you feel? What sort of things does that bring to mind? You know, someone might say lust, someone might say anger, someone might say hate. Who knows? Just ask yourself those questions and answer them. What does that color make you feel? While we're on color theory, I might also just quickly touch upon a few specific ways of identifying color schemes. This is stuff that a lot of artists do, so I think it's quite helpful and important in this discussion. So the first thing I want to direct your attention to is the old color wheel. So you may have seen this before. This is just a simple, easy color wheel, and it's actually a surprisingly helpful tool when you're trying to figure out color scheme. So if you're really, really stuck and you don't know what to pick, maybe considering one of these three options here is something that could be really helpful to you. So one option is complementary colors. So these are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. Now, complementary colors you use to kind of create a nice offset. They're kind of very high contrast colors. You know, you've got the main color, and then you kind of got the other kind of complementing color there too. Something that's really cool about this is, you could do something like, yellow and violet or purple or something like that. And these colors really pop and look really nice against each other. And in my opinion, this is a way to make really funky out there color schemes, kind of like what we were seeing on Unuku there. And that's really cool. So there's one option of looking at a color wheel and just directing your finger across until you see the color on the opposite side of one of the colors you want to use, and play around with some complementary colors. Another option on the color wheel is to take a look at analogous color schemes. So these are colors on the color wheel that are pretty much next to each other on the color wheel. You can sort of skip one or two if you want, but the good thing about this is they're very natural color schemes. It's stuff you might see in nature, for example, like autumn, fall leaves. These are all sort of shades of orange and yellow and red and stuff, and those colors are very close to each other, pretty much right next to each other on the color wheel. And so doing a color scheme much like this is very sort of visually pleasing, very natural, very organic, that kind of thing. So that works well. And then another thing to consider with the color wheel is triad or sort of triactic color schemes. So these color schemes are often very vibrant, and the way to sort of find these on the color wheel is to literally draw a equilateral triangle along the color wheel there, and as a result you get three very sort of distinct, very different colors that actually still work very well together. So if you really kind of want to branch out and use more than two colors, that's something to think about there. Now, of course, that sort of might be a little like out there and too kind of, I don't know, you don't really want to do all that when you're making your mock. You kind of just want to feel it and use whatever colors you want. Of course, that's an option. But if you kind of want to really create some atmosphere with the mock, or, you're really, really stuck and you want to just kind of play around with some stuff, doing a little bit of that's definitely something to think about there. So, yeah, a little bit of interesting stuff to wrap your head around and consider with your next mock. Just before we finish up on Unuku's mock here, one thing I really like about this is another mock that he actually made. Surprisingly, I was going to include this because I thought this was the Matoran version of that mock. Turns out they're actually two different mocks. This is the Acolyte by Unuku. But something I like about this is it could very well be the Matoran version of that mock. It has a very similar mask and color scheme and everything. And something that I really like about it is instead of the sand green that we saw before, he's used lavender there, which I think is kind of interesting. Maybe when the Matoran transitions into Toa, aspects of his color scheme change. I don't know, that's something to think about if one of your mocks has sort of like a form change or something. Maybe one of the colors shifts as that transformation happens. So I think that's something to think about. And something else to think about is to take a look at some friend sets. You may be a dude, or you don't really want to go out and buy the girl Lego, but it has some fantastic colors in it, so you can't deny how awesome this mock looks. And I mean, these colors look fantastic and works really well here. So never forget those friends colors, they're awesome to use. Let's take a look at another mock here, which is by Timothy Titrevev. No idea how to pronounce that. And this mock is called Fountain of Blood in the Shape of a Girl. So one thing I like about this so much is it is a monotone, monochromatic color scheme here, basically just being red. Of course, the base is using some light bluish gray there, but, that's besides the point. So something I like about that is there's nothing wrong with just simply going with one color. Quite often you see on some Bionicle mocks, people will just mainly stick to black just because there's so many pieces that come in black. It's a really easy color to use. Nothing wrong with that at all. But heck, if you've got a whole bunch of red, or you've got a whole bunch of green, or any color, then why not? Why not, break out all of that color and try and make one big old mock out of it? And like this mock, you can communicate some really interesting, cool stuff with it. The fact that the entire mock is red very much communicates the fact that she is, like the mock is called, bathing in blood, which is kind of creepy, but kind of cool. And so it's interesting there too, obviously if this was just a monochromatic red mock and it was just happened to be red, that's cool and that works. But the fact that it kind of has a little bit of story with it as well, the fact that it's actually, in a bath and that works really, really nicely and is really, really cool. Speaking of some other really cool things, some fantastic use of system here. We actually see very little Bionicle. Some of these hair pieces here, using some of these funky, I want to say they came in Ben 10 sets there. Not too sure, but we've seen them in Witch Doctor and a few other CCBS Hero Factory sets here and there, as well as some of the superhero construction sets as well. But, little aspects of those, some of the little claw pieces, the Rakshi heads and stuff. We've got little hints of Bionicle, but the mock is primarily system. And, I think that's always something to think about too. There are some colors that are very common in system, but very rare in Bionicle. So be sure to take a look at some system sets and some system pieces and colors, and see what you can use with those pieces to add an interesting color into a mock. And also too, with the way that construction is going as a theme, and, you see a lot of builders using more system these days, mixed in with your Hero Factory, your Bionicle, your CCBS, all sorts of stuff. So definitely kind of branch out and play around with system, because, there's a lot of readily available brand new new parts there, and you never know what kind of possibilities you might be able to come with if you're using those sorts of parts. So that's really cool. Also, one little detail I absolutely love is how all the blood appears to be kind of leaking out of this sort of basin thing here. Some very clever ways of showing that with ball joints, dishes, and teeth, and some sort of dishes made out of slopes and bricks and stuff like that. Fantastic stuff. Really, really cool to see. And one final thing before we finish up on this mock is the overall frame and shape of this mock. He's managed to create a very effective female figure. It's well-rounded. There's not very many gaps. It almost looks like an art piece. It's really, really cool. And that's something to kind of think about too. You know, a lot of artists, they typically look at the human body for inspiration. And maybe that's something to kind of think about. You know, Bionicle, you often build a lot of humanoid mocks. So maybe take a look at the human body, see what ideas come up. Because that's something that's surprisingly common with a lot of traditional artists, you know, sculptors and painters and stuff. They often look at the human body for their inspiration. So yeah, have a look at that, see what comes to mind. The next mock that we've got today is by Unijob L and is called The Tower of Rock Raiders. So I love this. I think this is a fantastic little mock. Something that's so cool about it is it uses the color scheme that you would typically find in old Rock Raiders sets. And I've spoken briefly about this before, but that's something to always think about. What sort of themes or sets had really iconic color schemes, or you know, what's a theme or set that you absolutely loved? Take a look at that color scheme and try and put it in a mock. Whether you're actually building a sort of Bionicle version of that mock, or you just want to kind of play around with those colors, it's something to think about. You know, something like Nexo Knights, or Classic Space, or Rock Raiders like this, for example, they had very iconic, really cool color schemes that worked really well. And so, you know, that's something to think about. Just play around with those color schemes, see what comes up, and have fun, really. Something else that's really unique about this, and not something you see every day, is someone has managed to effectively build a very awesome customized version of a sort of old Mutter style build. You know, he's used the old Mutter torso there, he's used the old Mutter feet here. It's very reminiscent of the very first wave of Bionicle. It's really, really cool to see. You don't really see people playing around with those sorts of really old parts anymore. And it's such a unique, awesome aesthetic here that also works really well with Bionicle, so that's really cool to see, and it really is really quite awesome. So do that, you know, maybe you've got some old very, very first wave of Bionicle parts and sets and stuff. Try playing around with them, see what stuff you can come up with, because it's a really unique, clever aesthetic, and it looks fantastic. One other thing I think is really clever too, Rock Raiders had a few chrome pieces like these chrome drills and stuff, and it's cool to see how he's combined that with this chrome howl. Now that is not a cheap part, but if you happen to have one lying around, or you have a few other chrome pieces you might want to use, heck, what a great idea, you know? And you only need, you know, like this mock shows, he's actually only used 3 chrome pieces. He's got this little dagger there on the side there, and he's managed to add a nice little accent color in there with some chrome parts, and that really makes the mock pop. I think it's really cool. Plus, too, like I was saying before about, you know, some system sets have colors that Bionicle just really doesn't. There's a lot of chrome pieces in LEGO, whether it's chrome gold or chrome silver, or in some other occasions you've got like chrome red or chrome black even. So, definitely take a look at some of those chrome system parts and see if you can kind of put those in sets, because man, chrome is a cool color, and there's not enough chrome Bionicle mocks out there. So there you go. And like we see with this mock here, you only need to use, you know, 2 or 3 of them in the mock to really make it work and fit into the color scheme. So there you go. Fantastic work, Unijob. Let's move on to the bonus mock very quickly. This mock is called CA1. I assume that's its name, but that's what it was on Flickr. And this is by Luna Still. So what I love so much about this is it uses a lot of parts from the old Mech Dragon from the Ninjago movie. Now, I've spoken about this Mech Dragon a lot if you watch all of my videos. It's a fantastic set, and a lot of its parts work surprisingly really, really well with Bionicle. Now, it's a more primarily system-heavy set, but you've got a few sort of pieces that work very well with Bionicle, or have some connections that work with Bionicle, like the dragon heads and stuff like that. But something that I think is so cool is, you know, you could go out and buy a set that has a lot of one color in it, like the Mech Dragon, comes with a lot of sand green. And then from that, you kind of use those pieces, and you can kind of spawn a mock off of that has a cool color scheme. And that too, it's pretty simple, effective, and easy. You know, you buy the set, you build the set, you have fun making it, you play with it for a bit, and you take it apart, and then you make a mock out of it. And that's value for money, man. That's awesome. So yeah, do that. Go out and buy a set with some cool colors and see what stuff you can make. And like we see with this mock here, he's just taken aspects of that Mech Dragon and then added some of, you know, his own little personal touches and pieces into the mock, and he's made, well, a fantastic little mock out of it. I absolutely love what he's done, putting the little dragon head in there for the torso. It's got a really unique shape to it, and really adds a really nice shape to the overall torso. It looks fantastic. I really, really dig that. And then I also love these shoulder pads here. You really pop, really look good. Get some cool, like, shoulder pads there. It looks fantastic. I really, really like it. And that's all we've got time for today, guys. We've seen 4 fantastic mocks with 4 really awesome, unique color schemes. Hopefully, you've learned a little bit of stuff. I suppose we saw 5 mocks, my bad. Let me correct that there. But, yeah, there you go. So, hopefully, having a look at some unique and cool color schemes here has inspired you a little bit. Hopefully, you've learnt a thing or two about the color wheel and how to kind of unpack colors there and, have a little bit of a think about what the color scheme communicates, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's all we've got time for today, guys. Happy building. I'll see you in the next episode. But before we finish, don't forget to check the links in the description to the mocks that you saw in today's episode. And as well, be sure to check the links there to my social media, because those places you can submit your own stuff. Just chuck me a link and some pictures, that sort of thing, either on my Instagram, Flickr, or Facebook, any of that sort of stuff. And you might appear in one of the Bionicle Inspiration Series episodes. That's right. Anyway, for real this time, goodbye, guys.